Welcome to Dateline Health. This is Fred Lippman. Yes, I'm wearing a mask. This is only to allow you to know that those of us at Nova Southeastern University and our guests want you to know three things, the three W's. Wash your hands, wear your mask, and make sure that you watch your social distancing. 6 to 8 feet, please. Wear your mask. Okay, we have a very special show today. Little did I know when our executive director, Rita Silverman, who has done many years of service here, but also was in charge of clinical research trials, had a relationship with a very well-known, very prominent, in fact, a preeminent physician, Dr. Howard Schwartz. Welcome, Doctor.
Hi, Dr. Lippman. Thank you for having me. Our company, Research Centers of America, has been conducting clinical research for the past 20 years or so. And over that period of time, one of our areas of expertise is vaccine research. And we've done almost 200 vaccine trials. And so vaccine trials in general have kind of had a negative connotation at times. There's some negative things out in the press about them. But vaccines are there basically to prevent disease and in essence save lives. And there's no better time in the world to learn about vaccine trials and see how individuals can make a difference. So a vaccine, as you know, we all start getting them when we're in childhood, and they're there to prevent diseases. And it kind of started, back in the 1800s that the first vaccines were invented to prevent measles. And since then, there's been smallpox, polio, big things that we've heard over the years, and things that have been more successful and things that have been less successful. But it's very common for people to have vaccines for pneumonia, to have vaccines for shingles, to have flu vaccines every year, DPT vaccines, meningococcus, and all of these diseases have been able to be eradicated. They were quite prevalent in the population, and by taking these vaccines, people developed immunity so that they either did not get ill, or if they do get ill, their symptoms will be somewhat muted or less severe. So we now face ourselves in the pandemic. The pandemic is something that we've all been preparing for and hearing about for a number of years. In my career, we've talked about H1N1. We talked about bioterrorism. We had Ebola a couple years ago. But this is the first time that a pandemic is real and it's here. Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation have been talking about it 6-7 years ago to kind of make the world aware of it. But nobody ever dreamed that we'd be facing an unprecedented health crisis like we have today. Whether you turn on the news, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, there's a lot of unknowns about a pandemic, and we're living through it. Sometimes the stories change, and medicine, just like life, is not perfect, and it takes time to understand the nature of the disease, what causes it, why some people become more ill than others, why some individuals are asymptomatic, and why some people end up sick and dying. It seems to be there seems to be certain predilection to people that are older and have comorbidities, and it's unclear why it spreads to different people. As Dr. Lippman said, the most important things that we can do are wear a face mask, social distancing, wash our hands, and if you're exposed to somebody with COVID-19, to self-isolate. With that said, vaccines are really the only way to get our lives back to normal. And so I think the idea is to kind of get this pandemic to quiet down would be all of these things that we've been talking about. It to get our lives back to normal, we need an effective vaccine to prevent the spread of the disease, mitigate the intensity of the disease, and to prevent the disease.
Let me just get to some of the, don't forget, this show is really a show that comes from our viewers. They ask questions. We've been doing the show for 21 years, and so far they've given us a lot of good questions and requests for information. Of course, we don't play doctor, or we allow our guests to communicate knowledge. Knowing of your extreme knowledge and in the area of medical clinical trials, but now specifically because of the knowledge that I have as to the trials that I believe you're involved in, and you don't even have to say which ones, obviously, that on vaccines. The greatest fear that we have that came to us is, how do I know that the vaccine is going to be safe?
Clinical trials are a very regulated process by the FDA. And so to get a vaccine to the market typically takes about anywhere from 5 to 10 years. And how a vaccine is developed, it goes through the typical stages of clinical trial development. The first before a vaccine is brought into human testing, it's tested in animals. And in animals, and there's some pros and cons, and people have certain beliefs about testing things in animals, but it's tested in a laboratory situation to make sure that the vaccine, they look for safety signals. Once they complete laboratory animal testing, it's moved into phase 1 human testing. And phase 1 human testing is really the first time that a vaccine is given to a human being. And at that point in time, it's given to a very small number of individuals. Typically, the first time a vaccine is given, it's usually given to 3 to 5 individuals, and we wait about a week to see if there's any side effects. Phase 1 is all about safety. We want to find out to make sure that different doses of the vaccine are going to be safe to an individual. And so with that, we start out at a low, with 3 to 5 individuals with kind of a low dose, and then we would kind of give it to a second group, maybe a little bit higher, and then maybe a third group, which is the dose you think you'll need, a little bit higher. So we start out at a very low dose and then build it up again, looking for side effects. And then through phase 1, we get safety data. We see if with a vaccine, most vaccines are given by an injection. Some are oral, but most of the ones by an injection. So we would see if they have any discomfort in the arm, if there's any redness at the site, if you have any systemic symptoms, fever, fatigue, joint symptoms, GI issues, headaches, and assuming that it gets through phase 1, meaning that there's very few safety signals, then it goes into phase 2 testing. Phase 2 testing, we get additional safety information. Typically, it's a larger group of volunteers. So when somebody goes into a vaccine study, they are volunteering. And when we get into phase 2, typically there's somewhere between 50 and 200 individuals who will get the vaccine at a dose, sometimes 2 doses, that they think they're going to use to prove efficacy. And at that phase 2 level, where oftentimes some vaccines fail, is we look for both safety as well as, does your body develop an immunity? Does the vaccine help identify the virus so that would prevent you from getting the infection in the future? And then kind of after phase 2, again, assuming it's safe and has some efficacy, it goes into phase 3 trials. That's where we really need a lot of individuals to volunteer and help make this vaccine a reality. So kind of after phase 1, where it's been, shown to be safe, and then phase 2 with a larger group that it seems to be safe, we go to the phase 3 data. Again, we do look for safety, but the primary focus of phase 3 is efficacy. Does this vaccine work in producing an immunity to the virus and prevent you from getting COVID-19 in this case? And then what, if any, side effects are associated with it? And after phase 3, typically it'll go to the market.
So, Dr. Schwartz, my understanding is that the trials that you're involved with now is phase 3. Is that correct?
For the most part, we participated in the earlier phases, and now we're moving on to phase 3 studies.
Okay, because that's really from the viewers' perspective, at least, you know, people are home. They're trying to mediate the problems of being involved in the general public, and I wish a lot of our people would not just go out willy-nilly and not meet the 3 W's, but that's another issue for another time. But you're in phase 3, and I would assume that when we talk about a opportunity to have this type of protection through a vaccine, that it's not just literally just for example, the United States of America. It's a pandemic. So most of these corporate entities are multinational corporate entities. And I would assume that there's a responsibility that we would have as not only the United States of America, but as human beings, to share whatever we have for the rest of the world. Is that correct?
Correct. So in phase 3 testing, and specifically here at Research Centers of America and other centers around the country, we're looking for a large number of volunteers to participate in phase 3 testing to see if we can prevent COVID-19 in individuals, prevent people from getting sick, help us get back to our normal lives. And the way that most of the phase 3 trials work is there'll be 2 parts to it. Typically, when we do vaccine trials, we don't do challenge tests. Challenging would be actually to give somebody a vaccine and then expose them to virus to see if we get sick. They do that. That is being done in animal models. But in phase 3 testing, what we're doing is an individual typically will be participating for up to 2 years, and we will they'll receive the vaccine, and they will be a volunteer. And being a volunteer for a vaccine trial in this at this point in time is really making a difference both for themselves as well as, you know, really a difference for humanity. So typically what will happen is that they would get a vaccine. Typically we work with several of the vaccines that we see on the news almost on a daily basis. So they would get the vaccine, or they would get a placebo, and we would monitor them for 2 things. We would check their blood to see if they developed an immunity. And secondarily, while you're in the study, you'll either have an electronic diary or a phone call or a text once a week to see how you do. So how the vaccines are going to get approved into the market is you have to prove 2 things. One is, are they safe? 2 is, does the individual develop immunity, meaning resistance to to COVID-19? And 3rd is, over the next year or 2, are less individuals going to get sick if they've had the vaccine? So what the hope is, and these are large studies, is that there's going to be probably 4 or 5 trials, each with about 30,000 participants. And as the trials go along, so in the first trial, for example, with Moderna, there's going to be 30,000 people enrolled in that particular trial. At different intervals, that'll be checked on a weekly basis how many people that had the vaccine came down with COVID-19 and how many individuals that got placebo came down with COVID-19. Because in essence, we don't really care if there's immunity. We want to see if it prevents disease. So after a couple of months, if it goes by that it turns out that across the trial, 300 or 400 individuals get coronavirus, and it turns out that the individuals that had the vaccine did not get coronavirus, and the individuals that got placebo did get the coronavirus, then the vaccine will get approved for widespread use, and we'll be done with this pandemic of epic proportion.
Let me just get into this on this, because the issue of getting to the success point of having a vaccine. As a really a preeminent researcher, how do you deal with that?
Thank you. Well, I think that so first, people have a misconception about vaccines. Individuals oftentimes the first thing people say is, I don't want to get a vaccine because every time I get the flu shot, I get the flu. And what actually happens is there's different types of vaccines. Some are live vaccines, some are not live vaccines. Some are injected, some are oral. But in general, vaccines don't give you the disease under study. Most of the vaccines that we get today, and the ones that we're studying in simplistic sense, is they basically take a part or a piece of the virus in this particular case, and they make sure that that particular part that is given as an injection is not going to make you ill. And so the symptoms you get after you get a vaccine, for example, some people say, I got the flu when I got the flu shot. The purpose of a vaccine is for your body to recognize something as foreign, so that when it gets reintroduced to the real virus, your body's ready for it. And in order for your immune system to kind of rev up and to kind of notice something that's foreign and attack it, your immune system has some reaction. We want the immune system to have a reaction. So some of the differences is if you don't have some of those symptoms or reactive symptoms, meaning you have no arm pain, no redness where you have an injection, sometimes that means that you're not going to get the immunity that you want. Sometimes kids, as we know, babies, they always really, we're always told, my grandkids, they're cranky the day they get their shot, so to speak. Sometimes older people don't have as robust an immune system, and therefore it's harder for them to get a good response, so that they do see the virus, they'll be able to fight it. And some of the newer flu shots actually give higher doses of the vaccine to older people who are less likely to have an immune response. And that's why it's good that we have several vaccine candidates for COVID-19. One might work better in young people, one might work better in older people, one might work better in individuals with different health problems, maybe in different ethnicities. But it's very important that we have people volunteer to help sort these issues out, to make sure that we have the best vaccine for the best vaccine for each of the individuals. Kind of what you talked about is, fear of vaccines. Is I think there needs to be a little bit of education. So vaccines have something called adjuvants. And what an adjuvant is that, imagine that if you needed to have a vaccine, you needed to drink a gallon of milk, or a large shot, a shot that we would call a big needle to accomplish a certain level of immunity or resistance to it. So an adjuvant makes a vaccine a little more potent. So a small dose can go a long way. So instead of a large syringe, you can have a very small syringe, and the adjuvant makes a difference. And with that, there's been some concerns that some of the adjuvants may have had some effect, or we've seen an increase in autism in kids, and there's been some concerns about that. It's always a concern whenever you do anything to your body. Anything that you put into your body, whether it be a pill or whether it be an injection, everything we do has a potential positive effect and a negative effect. And just because there's a small chance of a negative effect, if I told somebody there's a 99% chance they're going to get a positive effect and a 1% chance they're going to get a negative effect, they would probably be in favor of it, but have a little bit of a concern for that 1%. If I told you that there's 100,000, out of 100,000, you have a 999,998 chance of having some benefit, and a 2 out of 100,000 chance of having a negative side effect, most of us would take those, odds. Just like, for example, seatbelts. Sometimes seatbelts and airbags save a lot of lives, but there are people that have that have experienced a motor vehicle accident and have had injuries secondary to a seatbelt or an airbag. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have seatbelts and airbags in all of our cars. We all know that saves lives. And I think I equate that to vaccines. But each person is an individual. Participating in a clinical trial is voluntary, and that taking a vaccine, at least at this point in time, is a voluntary thing. Vaccines for schools, a lot of kids, unless they've had certain level of vaccines, can't go to schools and be around other people because it'll expose them to disease. How this plays out for whether vaccines are mandatory for COVID-19 down the road, we're not sure. But if the vast majority of Americans and people around the world are able to get vaccines, we will get back to a normal life.
I would say to you candidly, and I remember when my children were little babes, and when the polio, which was the frightful thing to the people, at least that where I grew up. I mean, going out in the summertime and going to the beach. No, you couldn't do that. You had to. That's where polio is. But when my children were growing up, then we went not from the Salk. We went from the Salk to the Sabin. They took the Sabin vaccine, but everybody was happy to take the Sabin vaccine. And I really don't know why there's such, I guess, almost intellectual contempt to taking certain vaccines, when the reality is that they could prevent really some very fatal and almost near fatal problems. But that's a question that came from the folks out here. There's another question that came from the folks, and that is that, and I don't know whether we have enough knowledge yet, but there's a beginning to hear, because people are staying home and they're watching, 24-hour television, not that they're watching it for 24 hours, but it goes on and on and on. And now there's a lot of reports about younger people under the age of 40, that are being infected by COVID-19. What do we hear about that?
I think it started in China. I'm not sure if we really, got all the information out. And then it kind of spread throughout the world, and we had very scary pictures on the news about a lot of older people dying in different parts of the world. We saw pictures from Italy, from South America, from India, and of course, almost on a daily basis from New York. So it's really not known. This is a disease that's been really only around for 6-7 months, and we're really just trying to learn about it. It seems that children and younger adults that are healthy are less likely to have a severe illness. So most individuals, that you talk to is, younger people, I don't need a mask. It's just the flu. It's no big deal. I always say to them, you have to be very careful, because, some young people tolerate it very well. There are a number of young people, a very, very small percent of the individuals that have died in the United States. Less than 10% are kind of under the age of 60 and healthy. So the majority of the people that are at risk are individuals that are older and have other medical conditions. But most young people come in contact with people over the age of 60. And most young people come into contact with people that have diabetes, autoimmune disease, and other medical conditions. So you not only have to take care and protect yourself, but you have to make sure you don't give it to somebody that you care about and love, or even other people you come in contact with. So it's really everybody's obligation to take this disease seriously.
Well, we're getting down to the last few minutes of this broadcast, and I really, we could probably do another 2 broadcasts to get all the information out. But I want to say, firstly, I want to thank you, Dr. Howard Schwartz, for the many years that you've been involved in clinical research. Believe me, you're a preeminent individual in the field of clinical research, and I personally want to thank you, not only for myself, but for all the viewers that are out here, because you do some things that are very near heroic, and I want to thank you. And the second thing I want to say is that, there are a lot of folks that are scared, and I'm very happy that you're here to do this broadcast, because I hope that some of what you provided us information on will mitigate some of the anxiety, the scariness of what's going on. We listen to all the details. We know the number of people that die. We see the overwhelming numbers of people that are infected. We see the very heroic healthcare workers and the EMT paramedics and others that are giving themselves and their lives to the protection of all of us out here. So I really want to put you in that category, because you're one of those heroic people too. And I know that your work over the next few months are going to be very, very important. I just hope that the people that are watching don't expect what I would call the time miracle. It takes time to do what you have done for many, many years. Correct?
Correct?
Yes, and certainly, thank you for the compliment, and thank you for inviting me on the show. And I would like to make one request or a statement is we are looking for people throughout the country to participate in these clinical trials. It's very important to help. It's voluntarily. Some people are a little bit afraid of clinical trials. We put about 2,000 individuals a year for the last 15 years into vaccine trials. Fortunately, we've never had anybody that required a hospitalization or had a significant serious side effect. But each study has its risks and benefits to it, and we're looking for people to volunteer to participate in these trials. And if the trial proves to be successful, and hopefully a lot of these vaccines will, as a participant, not only will you be helping get a good vaccine to the market and help society, but you may be one of the people that get early protection, because you will have access to a vaccine that could potentially I say, prevent you from getting coronavirus.